Now it is my pleasure to introduce Samina Safdar with Pinnacle Consulting Group, who will introduce the rest of our presenters. Samina?
Great. Well, thank you so much. So as mentioned, I'm Samina Safdar, and I work with Pinnacle Estimating Services, and it's my pleasure to introduce our three speakers to you today. So Faizi Syed is the Principal and Chief Strategist of Pinnacle Estimating Services, a company that he started, gosh, when was that started, Faizi? I should know that off the top of my head, shouldn't I?
2012.
2012, and he brought a lot of his experience from flooring into Pinnacle to create a company utilizing technology to partner with contractors to free you up for more important things. Our second speaker we have today is Patrick Wizawati, from Contemporary Painting. So Contemporary Painting is a Denver metro area full service painting company with experience of 45 plus years in the painting industry. So Patrick has lots to share with us, not just on construction. Pardon me, can you still hear me, everybody? Okay, and let's Jessica, if you could just make sure everyone's muted, but me and the three speakers. And then our final panelist we have today, very excited to have Brian Drux, the founder and CEO of Drux Inc., along with about 5 other companies. So, I have put the links to each of their LinkedIn profiles in the chat. Brian may also touch on Where Trades Go, his exciting new company that's basically a dating app for contractors and employees. So with that, I'm going to let Faizi take over and add anything else before we get started.
Samina, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Faizi Syed. And I wondered, when Richard Bright asked me to talk about the subject of unpredictable economy estimating and its effect, I was very excited because I think now is the time to talk about these things a lot more than before. And as we go through a lot of the information, you will see the impact of what's happening today on our estimating, also the impact of what happens when economy is flourishing and how estimating can support it. I am delighted to have Brian with me on this call, on this presentation. Samina touched on that dating app. I have to elaborate. Brian is one of the most creative individuals I have met, and I thoroughly enjoy his company more than anything else. And Brian came up with a dating app called Where Trades Go. It is an app that connects the tradespeople with the subcontractors and the subcontractors with the trade people. And it is one of a kind. I just wanted to mention that. And then Patrick, good to have you. Patrick again is an expert in this field and dominates the Colorado market. And if you wonder why I said that, his close ratio is 80+%. I said, Patrick, you need to write a book, and I need to read it. So welcome.
Great to be here.
Welcome. It's good to have both of you, and your insight and your comments will be much appreciated. So let's talk about the unpredictable market that we are dealing with, the volatile market we are dealing with, and what that really means. We've seen a lot of changes. We've seen a lot of decisions that have been made by the administration in an effort to improve how things will be in the future and reduce some of the excess spending. I'm not here to spend much time on it, but what I'm here to talk about is how it is going to affect what we do as contractors. Now, in earlier conversations that I had with Brian and Patrick, it doesn't affect us right now, because in construction, everything that you are working on, some take almost 2 years to come to fruition, others 6 months, immediate. So everybody has a backlog that we are working off of, but we hope and pray that when things turn the corner, that of course we hope that it's a positive, that the people that are unemployed are now employed. The growth continues, not just in one particular sector, but in every sector, and I'm going to touch on that also. Now the question is, as looking at costs, how do we adjust those costs when we are dealing with such a situation, be that growth or cutbacks? And it's interesting. A couple of the studies that were done, you will see as we go along as to what they found and how adapting and preparing ahead of time is important. You look at the snapshot of construction to give you a small sample.
Sorry.
Um, there you go. The snapshot of construction, which was put out by CBRE, Cushman and Wakefield, and in 2024, your commercial vacancy rate was at 12%, and we were very concerned. For 2025, they projected it to be at 11%, which was an improvement. Yes, it is an improvement for now, but we have that unpredictability for the next half of the year. Office vacancy rate was at 18% nationally. In 2025, it was supposed to be at 16%. Let's hope it's that or less. In 2024, unfortunately, retail has started to take big hits because of purchases online. It was 20% on occupancy rate, and now it's 25 because the brick and mortar are kind of available. And believe it or not, a lot of those we were talking about pickleball. Nordstrom closed; they turned it into a pickleball court, which is great. I mean, at least the real estate is being utilized. Go ahead, Samina.
Yep.
We talked about when we are getting ready to look at effects of economy, whether they are positive or negative. What else do we look at? Do we wait till we come to a point where, okay, now what do we do? Or do we plan ahead? It's very positive when you look at the different sectors that are available to us today nationally. You look at the commercial end of it, you're going from 450 billion in 2024 to 471 billion in 2025. Let's say that doesn't pan out. What about healthcare? Always you can bet on healthcare because they have the money and they spend it, and they have to spend it because of the growth in population. Um, 310 billion in 2024 as compared to 330 billion in 2025. Education, as population grows, more schools will come, more bonds will be approved. So 206 from 216 billion, we go to 227 billion. Data centers will change the world. And actually, I'm sitting in the mecca of data center. Virginia was posted as world's largest data center, from 121 billion to, excuse me, 143 billions. And if you look at percentages, the growth for commercial was supposed to be at 4.5, healthcare always the strongest, 6.2, education 5.1%, and data center 18%. Now I emphasize on healthcare because when they're done building data center, healthcare will be still standing there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So let's turn for a minute and ask our panelists about their thoughts about the uncertainty of the economy and the vacancy rates. Can we start with you, Brian?
I have my grandfather's corporation papers here for starting our company in 1955, and so this is just another circle that we're going through. You know, the numbers, they don't mean anything to me. They because based on where you are in the country, it's such a diverse economy.
Sure.
Right now, we're right outside of New York City. 2 years ago, my main company is a commercial painting company. The majority of our work was tilt-up warehouses. I think we got one this year. So, and the commercial office sector is okay. It's not great. doing a lot of schools, a lot of courthouses, jails. So public work has been the savior. So it's about a balanced basket. You know, we're still, there's no lack of bidding here in New Jersey. The closing rates are what they should be for us, which is some 17 to 20% is what our goal here is.
Okay. Are you all seeing anything change with people holding off or pausing on starting projects, or?
The only thing I see is nobody's hiring. Everybody's put hiring on hold. They are making do with the staffs that they have. They're not they're not supplementing their field. They're not supplementing their office, which is great for estimating outsourcing.
Yeah. Patrick, are you seeing something similar in your part of the country and your part of the industry?
We are, and I think the office sector has probably been hit the most that we have noticed.
Mhm.
To echo, Brian, the schools and the public work, that stuff has always kind of been going on, and it goes on in the background, and we try to explore some of that, and also the private sector, on the vacancy rates, I just feel like some of those buildings never recovered through the pandemic. I think a lot of folks were remote, and they realized that they can work remotely, and they are not as eager to get back into it, maybe
Mhm.
outside of some other companies. And we're seeing that from small, big, and medium-sized companies. So it definitely pays off to be diversified in kind of the work that you're looking to do. Because if one of these sectors is not doing as well, you could shift gears and make sure that you're staying busy out there.
Oh, that makes sense. So actually, I'm just going to skip ahead. Like, are you and your company specifically looking at other industry sectors right now
Uh,
or
yeah,
previously?
so we are looking to actually add a drywall and ACT division to the company. This is something that we've explored for the last year or two, based on feedback from clients and what they would like us to take on and be more or less a one-stop shop for some of the finishes and be able to do multiple divisions. So we're in the process of going through some of that and figuring out all the little nuances that come with taking on new divisions and new work, and we're excited to see what's ahead.
Hmm. That's really great. That's really great. If until things stabilize, like Brian, what do you think subcontractors should be doing to reduce their overhead or increase their efficiency? Or what have you guys done?
You know, I'm a firm believer in being a lean, mean fighting machine, as they say, and,
Hmm.
and I am incredibly cheap. So it's hard for me to spend a dollar. And right now, I mean, we are go, we are nickeling, diming everything that we do in this office.
Yeah. So you're watching everything really closely in terms of those expenses.
Yeah, the biggest problem we have right now is they're raising the rents in New Jersey. Our rent is going up in September 25%,
Oh,
and
wow.
we're seeing that across uh, all my various counterparts in all different industries in New Jersey. The smaller commercial real estate buildings, the 3 to 20,000 square foot spaces, which are the tough ones to find, the rents are just going astronomical.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that's really fascinating. Faizi, is this what you're seeing across your client base from the subcontractors you work with?
So here's the thing. Um, Brian mentioned that these situations and do not affect him. That's an amazing way of looking at things because he recognizes all the other sources of income that are available. You look at um, uh, subcontractors who are bidders. There's a difference between negotiators and bidders. That they continue to bid. The more you bid, the more your overhead goes up. It's not just rent; it's your overhead of estimating.
Yep.
And we'll get into those numbers in a bit. Um, being a lean machine is what needs to happen. companies need to look internally to see where they can cut costs, how they can reduce their overhead by 30% and increase their ability to um, 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 be out there, be that in the form of FaceTime or in the form of proposals that they can bid more to be able to uh, compete with everybody else who's out there.
Yeah. And we're excited to talk about, how some companies have successfully done that. I want to switch gears for a minute and get our audience to tell us how they're dealing with the uncertainty in the market. So if you could just throw in the chat the letter that, resonates with what you're mostly doing to deal with uncertainty in the market, hopefully this economy stabilizes a little bit and there's not, external factors that are impacting it, whether that's tariffs or, federal government layoffs or that type of thing that A, is not what you have to consider. But what are you guys doing? Like, feel free to just throw, your answer in the chat of what you're trying to do to kind of deal with this. You'll have to forgive me. I'm afraid if I stop sharing, people won't be able to see the options. So I might ask Charisse or Jessica to tell me what they're seeing most of in the chat.
We don't have any comments in the chat just yet.
All right, let's move on to the next.
Okay, let's move on. Okay, so Faizi, tell us how people should adapt to this wait and see market, or how you're seeing people do that.
Well, the first thing that what they're doing is looking to see how they can maximize face time. When you look at Teams time, it's more towards face time to be able to go out and look at other opportunities, how they can maintain or increase their profit, be that lowering their overhead, reassigning resources that are within, and what other industry sectors are available which they can pivot towards.
Yep. And that obviously,
Along,
go ahead.
right along this line, there was a study done, and the study was done, case study, which is, I'd like to spend some time on it because I think this is applies to a lot of subcontractors, not all, but a lot. In a case study that was done by Fuse Alliance and StarNet, to give you an example, who are still continue to buy a lot of flooring companies. And to date, they have combined 300 and 550 locations and growing. And the whole purpose, once they bought it, everybody had their own way of doing things. Everybody else had their own way of going about things. So they set a goal once they looked at everything that, okay, how can we reduce, in order, again, the more you bid, the more your cost goes up. How can we reduce their estimating costs by 30%? Let's start from there.
Mm-hmm.
And be able to, at the same time, accomplish more face time, more bids in different sectors. So this applies to companies that were doing hard bids, and their close ratio was much lower. What the cost of submission was, and particularly no cost change orders, as we know. Those are the killers. When you are rushing things, when you are putting bids out, when you don't have time to look at the details, when you don't have time to look at the addendums, they cost. This is a very costly thing to do. And again, it's time management. Go ahead, Samina.
Sure. So tell us about the findings from that case study.
If you move on, there you go. So what they did was they took a sample of their companies they owned, and they recognized that those companies that were the sales revenue was 10 million and the close ratio was 10%, they were bidding 100 million. Okay, great. What is the cost of doing that 100 million? It was between 3 to 4%, which the cost being the estimating cost of putting these proposals together. When they broke that further down, go ahead, Samina.
Yep.
when they broke it further down, they recognized, let's say we have two estimators, you're paying them 100,000 each, and these are just um, um, numbers that were picked just to make a point. You have three PMs then. So once you do the estimate, it goes to the project manager or sales manager. That person reviews it. It then goes to the customer, comes back, it's reviewed again, or if there is a change, it goes back to the uh, uh, estimator, and it keeps going back and forth for a bit before it is finalized. That loss of productivity from the estimator is about 20%. 10% of the time they found out was spent on change orders. If you go back to the change orders,
Yep.
add all those up, and that's how they came up with 400,000 is what it was costing companies to put estimates out. Now, most time when you ask a company, how many estimators do I have? Two. Great. And you're putting all these bids out? Yeah. Well, how many other people are touching it before it goes out and comes back in and then goes back again? That is the total cost of putting an estimate out. Go ahead, Samina.
Yep.
Training costs, they recognize that you hire a junior estimator who doesn't know anything. It'll take him about 3 months to kind of figure out what's going on. And then they become a mid-level estimator to somebody who can actually estimate. And we go back to that 100,000 number that we looked at. Samina.
Yep. And tell us a little bit more about the preparation time and what goes into each estimate.
Right here. So initially you're looking at scoping, and they looked at about 15% of the time. 70% of the time was spent in estimate generation, takeoff, and then proposal generation. Are the numbers right? What is the percentage? Who's bidding at what percentage?
Yeah.
Of course, then we go back to the infamous no-cost change orders. And no-cost change orders are, again, it's because a lot of times they found that you're rushing.
Yep.
You're not identifying scope. You're not submitting RFIs on time. So you're being held accountable that you should have known this, you didn't. In cases they found it was using the wrong scale. And when you look at industry wide, FMI Corporation recognized that 35% of the no cost change orders came from mistakes that were made at the time of bidding.
Wow. Wow. Okay, so let me turn to Patrick and Brian a little bit. What are your thoughts on this study? Maybe I'll start with you, Patrick.
It's very interesting. I mean, I think the numbers are very real, and the cost of estimating, almost feel like um, gets overlooked, So being able to see those numbers on the screen and really put a number to it and say, hey, this is really what it costs us to pursue work. Because those costs can add up really quickly. And then on top of that, if you're not landing as much work as you'd hope you could, then it could really affect not only your bottom line, but your operations, right?
Yeah.
So I think we definitely should be looking at that and realizing what the actual acquisition cost is of certain jobs. But to touch on the no cost change order, I mean, we see that quite a bit where we go to a client and we try to be as thorough as we can and scope a lot of these things ahead of time so we don't have these scope gaps that could really kill projects, not only for the sub but also for the GC as well, because it brings in conversations that nobody wants to have, and at the end of the day, somebody has to absorb that cost, right? And having a thorough estimate and a thorough takeoff takes a lot of these things, and allows you to be more thorough and tell your client what the actual thing is that is missing in the scope, and hopefully have that conversation up front so it could be addressed before the bid is submitted.
Yeah. No, that's really great. I mean, Brian, do you see no cost change orders impacting, contractors on the
Uh,
job?
if I go back to your chart of your breakdown, there was a couple items that were missing as far as breakdown of a bid. There's a couple items that I think are important because they are part of the bid process. Uh,
Okay.
One is, after the bid is done, we have an internal, meaning our company reviews our bid. Here, this is the one.
Yeah.
So after the takeoff is done, after the proposal is generated, then we review that bid before it goes out the door. Right? Then it goes out the door. Maybe goes out with some questions. So there's some RFIs that come out. Now you have to go back and review and make some changes, and then you start to have a conversation with your client, and then they want to review your bid and go everything. So there's a few items that are not on this list that
Wow.
even add more time to the bid process.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So I know that you have both, partnered and, should have disclosed this probably at the beginning that you're both, clients who have partnered with Pinnacle Estimating Services. You know, have you seen a reduction in no cost change orders since you partnered with, a US based estimating company like Pinnacle? Or
So
maybe
if you're
that's
saying
not.
scope, if you're saying scope mistakes, I don't see any scope mistakes. It's that simple. We don't. We're not seeing any misses.
That's good to hear. Because that's really what's leading to a lot of these no cost change orders, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. I think a lot of like to echo Brian, a lot of these things are taken off the table. And, if you have a partner like Pinnacle that can do a lot of this review for you before it gets to your internal review, you can really feel confident going into some of these bidding situations and know that you have a complete scope covered, and really feel good about your numbers.
Yeah. That's great. That's really good. It's like one less thing to worry about, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, turning a little bit to the audience, and I'm not going to Ferris Bueller anyone you. So if you don't feel like answering in the chat, don't feel like you have to. But just kind of interesting for a lot of contractors, like how much of your work is negotiated versus hard bid. I know both, Brian and Patrick are with companies that have existed over, 4 decades in their markets, and they've got a lot of repeat business. But just something to think about for yourselves on the call, how much of that you're looking at. And presumably if you move into a new industry sector, you'll be looking at more hard bids that you're submitting. So something to think about there. Another thing to consider is specifically what your close rate is for that hard bid work. As Patrick mentioned, and as Brian just mentioned, there's a lot of things that go into every single estimate. It's not done once it goes out the door. And if you're not winning that work, it's like you've gotten no return on investment on that, right? You've put all that time and energy into a bid that doesn't get selected. So again, you don't have to answer, but just something to think about where, if these are the metrics that you guys are looking at, if you hold yourself to a certain standard or rate to ensure you've got the money coming in to keep your profit margins where they are. Okay. So let's shift gears for a minute. And Faizi, I'm going to turn back to you to talk a little bit about what Brian and Patrick just opened the door to about partnering with a US based estimating company.
Thanks. So I always believed if you are able to fulfill someone's need according to the way they want it, it'll be successful. The challenge in our industry is finding good quality estimators who don't come with bad habits. So this is why we mimic what our clients want to do. We provide experienced estimators, and there is no learning curve. It's absolutely from day one. After we do the initial onboarding, it's go. There's no slowing down. It's just a matter of earning stripes and letting our clients get the confidence that they deserve. On top of that, we make available a project management team where they can call in and ask any questions that they may have in real time, so that there's no delay in providing um, any responses. It's provided within a very reasonable amount of time, because our office is open from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. and also 5 p.m. And also we are in on the West Coast, so we make up the time difference there. Um, Again, real-time communication, and then scalability. The whole thing is, um, when companies are doing well, they start looking, of course, for estimators to grow their to take care of the workload. Then you go through the process again of finding the right person, being able to retain that person, and that scalability is a non-issue with us. You give us a call within a couple of days, we should be ready to go. Increasing level of trust. We're partners in business. We're like, just because we're not in their office doesn't mean that we're not part of their company. The only way anybody can rely on you is if you are part of what they do. And when I started Pinnacle, those were some very key factors, basic key factors that needed to be addressed.
Yeah, and actually, I think Patrick, sorry to pull you in on this, but I know you talked a little bit about that level of trust with the partnership with Pinnacle in terms of estimators looking and notifying you guys about gaps they saw. Can you speak to that at all?
Absolutely. I mean, anytime I feel like you entrust somebody with your bidding process and have them basically be plugged into your company, uh, they have to be a partner, right? And what Pinnacle I feel like does a really good job at is uh, going through the process and doing it in a way that your organization is used to doing it, and maybe finding some other efficiencies, and how they communicate the scope of work. I tell my guys all the time. I said, the way that the information is presented on the plans with the scope sheets and everything else, we could quickly look at a set of 200-page drawing and have a really good understanding by reading through the notes that Pinnacle and our partners provide for us, to have a really good understanding on the job, so we can either ask the questions or adjust the way that we're providing the numbers to the client, or simply have an understanding of the scope of work so we can speak to that as we go through the process. So it's always, I feel like, scary when you're trying to do a new thing. I mean, change is one of those things that nobody likes. And this definitely was new to us at the beginning of this process. But now I feel like, Pinnacle is a integral part of our business, and what they do for us allows us to really spend the time necessary to go through the actual pricing process of the project, and hone in on the numbers, because we understand what the scope is, and we have very accurate numbers to base our proposals off of.
Yeah, that's really helpful to hear. So, it's funny. I was having a conversation with a C-suite member this morning in a completely different industry, and he was talking about, how people are afraid to change because they're not even sure what's in it for them. They're not sure if it'll be worth it. So, Faizi, can you talk a little bit about the impact on a contractor's business growth if they outsource their estimating?
Forgive me, my computer is acting up for some reason, but absolutely, you talk about growth. We work for companies that do anywhere from 2 million to $1 billion in sales revenue, and it is so refreshing to watch companies grow, that were in their infancy to all the way they are. I don't know if we ever mature or not, Brian, but semi-maturity. And it's awesome to see that progress and be part of that progress. So it frees them up to have face time. It frees them up to be in front of their customer. It frees them up to grow up. And I mean it when I say this, to grow up to be like Patrick and Brian, to where they don't have to be at 5%, but it takes a while to get to that point. And that's where we come in, is to help them get to that point. And there are many success stories throughout the US.
Yeah, and I know that was something that Brian mentioned, so that they just don't have mistakes doing it. And so that really makes it all a lot easier. So yeah, obviously if you can rely on that estimating and it's, faster and more accurate, you're not using your own internal employees' time for it, it's going to increase the number of bids you can put in and get you more to those statistics we saw from the case study. So just going to go forward one more, and you already started touching on this, Faizi, about the impact on your company's client retention. So, when a company partners with a US-based estimating company like Pinnacle, what does that do for the various folks on contractors' teams like Brian and Patrick's, project managers, sales and account managers? What does that do for them in terms of their time allocation?
Look, first and foremost, reallocation of people. And then right side by side to that is reduction of overhead. If you're paying an estimator 130,000 plus, and we come in and we can save 30-40%, that's immediate saving. Now add to that the amount of time, Brian said, there are multiple stages of putting a proposal out. Now add to that, except for the ownership or the senior project manager's time to put a proposal together and send it out, you look at all the other stages and the costs associated with it. It adds up. And you take all that money and apply it towards either growth or to your bottom line. That's a business decision.
Yeah. Well, and it's something.
Our ability, with minimum interruptions, we also can produce substantially more than a seasoned estimator would. Also, along with that is during busy seasons, we have the depth to support our clients to get them through that.
Yep. And from what we can see on the screen here, it's helping project managers spend less time on supporting kind of the estimation task because, estimating companies, at least Pinnacle, comes with project management, and it allows them to shorten, those bid revision cycles, that back and forth that, Patrick and Brian mentioned. But also for your sales or account managers or whoever meets that function at your company, that they're able to spend more time focused on clients and kind of understanding the estimate. And you can see from the statistic there from Forrester Research that, companies that allocate more time to engaging with clients do see an improvement in client retention. And I think Brian and Patrick have both spoken to, their high retention. I don't know if either of you want to speak to that, Brian or Patrick.
Well, the thing that I find interesting is with all these numbers that we throw up here, most companies, right? There's leading indicators and there's trailing indicators, and most companies, they keep all their focus on the trailing indicators, right? Their net profit at the end of the year, their sales numbers at the end of the year, and all the things that we're talking about, the number of bids that go out the door, the quality of that bid, those are all the leading indicators that most companies don't have a metric to measure what success looks like, right? You hire a salesperson, you hire a business development person, you got a metric, right? They got a sales goal, they've got a percentage, they've got a margin on the sale, but the bid costs, as you've shown, are extremely high, but yet most companies don't have a system to measure what that metric is, so they won't even know what success looks like. And then you have a company who comes in and says, we're going to change the way you bid and we're going to save you money. And they have no way of knowing what that means because they don't have a system in place to measure the metrics associated with the cost.
Oh my God, Brian, I run into that all the time. And when you show it to them, you're afraid to show it to them because you don't want to make them look like a fool. So you delicately, tread the waters and say, I think if you give it an opportunity, but they don't have time. They're just so busy chasing their tail. And those who take the time and listen benefit from it. And
Yeah.
that's the whole thing.
And you talked about trust. Well, you know, trust is something that usually takes years, right, to develop trust, right? You look at your long-term friendships, they're years old. That didn't happen overnight. Yet in business, we expect things to happen overnight. And we know that human beings are not quick to change.
Yeah.
Uh, but when you are either forced to change or open to change, then that allows trust to be developed on a lot quicker basis because you have no choice. And if Fozzie had come to me uh, with just no experience on my end of outsourcing my estimating, I don't think I ever would have made that change. But we happened to have of crazy circumstances years ago where we were forced to do um, remote estimating, an
Mhm.
internal employee, but we were forced to do it. So I was already experienced in that. And then just luck came where our paths crossed. So I
Mhm.
was already open for minded for the change. I already had trust in the system of what remote estimating looked like. And now it was just the golden opportunity just worked out.
Oh, that's actually really helpful. Again, just thoughts for the audience, and don't answer if you don't want, but these are some of the common things we've heard from contractors in terms of why they've not partnered with an estimating service at this point in time. Beyond just the, oh, I never heard of it or considered it, but just, being afraid their cost might increase or the accuracy of their estimates might go down. They're not doing them in-house, or, a worry that they won't be able to get in touch with an estimating company quickly enough if they're in another time zone, you know, across the world, or just, is it worth my time to change to this new method of doing things? So, you guys have both made this leap. So, Patrick, I'll start with you. Did you or your team have any fears before you decided to partner, and how did you or your employees overcome those?
Yeah, I mean, the fears were always real, and like I said, I think change is one of those things that nobody likes. But like Brian said, there's certain circumstances where, if something's not working or if something can be improved, I'm always of the thought, like, can we do this more efficiently, better, more accurate, and faster, right? So we can focus on other things that we can really focus on within our company that are going to make big impacts as a whole. Um, I feel like what it allows us to do, um, it strengthens our ability to put out numbers to our clients in a faster, more efficient way. um, the trust gets built by seeing the results. There's one thing that Pinnacle does really well, and that's communicating. And not only from communicating the scope of work and the takeoff and all these things that are available to you to make an educated decision as to how you're going to price it and present it to the client, but being able to get this information ahead of time, so we have the proper amount of time to review it and put the stuff together. You know, um, it has been my experience that these guys are really conscious about the time of when they return certain projects and how they handle certain projects. That allows us to have that peace of mind where we've gotten to a point, quite frankly, where we send it and we get it in time to do what we have to do, and we don't have to worry about um, our estimating side of things. And we came from uh, a point where we had internal estimators within our office that were doing this, and we went completely to a point where Pinnacle does all of our pre-construction basically, and we feel so confident that it's been a phenomenal partnership. And it actually, the crazy part about this whole thing is I had a partner in the industry that came to us and said, "Hey, have you guys thought about this?" And at that point in time, I didn't even know that this existed. So it was definitely a new concept for us. But if you're open to it and if you give it a shot, and they're always willing to help, they're always willing to answer those questions. But then they also understand the cycle and basically have a system in place that you could really rely on, which is very refreshing.
Yeah. So Brian, let me switch gears to you. Like, were there? I know you knew Faizi and kind of had gotten thrown together on a remote estimating project, but before that happened, were you worried about how that partnership would go or how it might impact your business?
Yeah, like when you make a change, it's never just one thing that has to change. There's multiple things that have to change to have success with that. So my fear was that I was going to outsource my estimating and a customer was going to call, and A, I had to admit that I was outsourcing my estimating, which I thought was a
Mhm.
negative. And then B, that they were going to have to call the estimator, and that was going to piss my client off because they would have to call some estimator that they don't know. Uh,
Mhm.
was there going to be a language barrier? Was there going to be an accent barrier? But our customers, when they have a question about the bid, they don't call Pinnacle. They call head of estimating in our company, who, remember I said we review every bid when it's
Yeah.
done. So that head of estimator now, instead of having to do 10 takeoffs, he only has to do 10 reviews, which has freed up all this time to do other things.
Mhm.
But now when the client calls, he's reviewed the project. He understands the project. He's seen the color coded plans that Pinnacle provides. So it's no different than somebody who reviews contracts before they go out the door, or somebody looks at the P&Ls at the end of the month, or the
Yep.
check reconciliations. But it is a process change, and if you're not open to process change, if you're not open to process in the first place, you're looking for trouble. But if you're not open to process change, then it's probably a dead end. But
Yeah.
when you are, I mean, it's wonderful.
That's great to hear. That's great to hear. So, do you think the fact, and I'll just open this to either of you, that you partnered with a US based company has been significant for your partnership? I mean, it sounds a little bit like you were touching on that, Brian.
Yeah, the so I'm hiring right now for one of my software companies, and we are outsourcing to South America, and I'm very concerned with that whole prospect of people from other countries and the ramifications, the experience for my customers who are going to be using these services. And with Pinnacle, I don't feel that we are, you say US based, which is really important to me. I couldn't tell you where they were based because it's such a seamless experience.
Mhm.
Great to hear. That's great to hear. Has that been the experience for you, Patrick?
Yeah, once we committed fully and went through the onboarding process, and the team understood kind of what we were looking for, it's very seamless, and it really allows us to have the time to do other things and not focus on estimating. We can go out there and develop business, and we can go out there and meet with clients and visit the job sites that we need, and really take care of the things that generate more business for us in the interim. So having that trust and the ability to outsource that to a company that has the ability to take care of and check all those boxes for you, it's huge.
That's so great. And I know just an anecdote that you were sharing, Brian, on a prior call. I don't think I mentioned in the intro of all your companies that you also are a musician. And you mentioned a little bit about your experience as an early musician or even an early, construction employee on a job site and what it's like now. Can you share that anecdote with us a little bit?
Yes, I was saying that when you're a struggling musician, right? You carry all your equipment, you load everything onto the stage, then you do what you're really there to do, which is sing and play your guitar. And at the end of the night, you rip it all down. And and then as you become more and more successful, when you eventually become a superstar, hopefully you have road crews that set up all your equipment, that do all the things that you're not great at doing, which allows you to focus on what you're great. For me, is playing guitar and singing.
Yeah.
Well, it's no different in our office, and that's what the story was about the estimating. You know, the takeoff is very time consuming. It's very detail oriented.
Hmm.
It's not. It's more science than art, right? But then when you take those numbers and you put them into your company's production rates and you try to find efficiencies and the art of how you can produce something, and then the conversations with your customers, that's what the entrepreneur is really good at.
Yeah.
So if you're really good at that, why spend all your time on the takeoff? Why spend your time loading the guitars and amplifiers on? And which, by the way, in my career, I went from doing it all myself to having a road crew, and I'm still playing, but now I'm doing it all myself again.
So you come full circle. I love it. I love it. So
Awesome.
any parting, last thoughts from you guys on what you think subcontractors who are thinking about outsourcing their estimating should be looking for in a partner? Because it sounds like you both had really great experiences, but what do you think they should look for when they're considering a company to partner with?
Well, the I see somebody put a question: what happens when
Mhm.
Pinnacle bombs an estimate and underestimates the materials? Right, that was a fear. What happens?
Mhm.
You know, we haven't had that. And so, are we lucky? Is Pinnacle that great? Or listen, I would imagine when I had employees who did my own in-house estimating, they screwed up. They made mistakes. We're humans,
Mhm.
so it happens. Uh, so maybe Pinnacle has made some mistakes here and there. Nobody's come to me as the owner of the company and said, "Man, Pinnacle really botched this up." So there are no bombs that I'm aware of, but I think that's a super understandable fear factor.
Sure, sure.
Brian,
Yeah, and I also, oops, I'm
I'd like
sorry.
to that if, of course, Pinnacle will bomb a project here and there. We're human. We're not robots. What happens when your best estimator bombs a project? You look at the fact, how much good has he done as compared to one mess up that he has done? We don't want to lose our job. We'll do everything in our power not to lose our job. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we haven't screwed up in the last 12 years. Yes, we have. When, we're not a machine. And when we do our best to see what we can do to rectify it. That's
Mhm.
important. When you look at a outsourced company, and this is where US base comes in very important, that you can ask a question and I can give you the answer. You ask a question of somebody on Fiverr or whatever those platforms are, or all the emails that I hear people get, where are you going to get that answer from? They're gone. So over here, we have a reputation to maintain. This is why I'm speaking on ASA platform. This is why two of my clients are sitting in front of you. And yes, in all the years that I've been doing this, what happens when you bomb a paint job? What happens when you bomb an installation, carpet installation job or a drywall job? Your customer looks at it. This is a good guy. He made an honest mistake. All right, don't do it again. No
Yes,
different.
Patrick. Any thoughts on what people should be, looking for when they're considering different partners?
I just to touch back on the bombing factor,
Yeah, please.
that's a real concern, right? I mean, I also look at it this way, as long as you have the systems and the checks and balances in place, it should alleviate some of those factors,
That's
right?
true.
Because not only is Pinnacle going to go through and say, hey, this is what we see on these plans that you guys should be looking at to price, but it's also, on us internally to go through that project and make sure that these things are accurate as well. Because at the end of the day, any project that comes out of our office is not only, coming from Pinnacle, it's coming from us. So at the end of the day, it's our responsibility to have that. But I think if you set this up properly, and understand the things that are expected of the team, and how these things can be easily checked, it can alleviate a lot of those fears.
Yeah, that's great. So we have a few best practices, and I'm just going to run through these real quick, Faizi, because everyone will have this recording after the fact, because I want to make sure we can get to any other questions and answers. But just a few best practices for success as we're in this sort of what's happening next to this economy. So, joining peer groups and associations, getting on webinars like this from ASA, always a good option to hear what other folks are doing. You heard Patrick talk about their, considering offering additional services. So seeing what you can do there, finding ways to reduce the time you spend on estimating, period. And you've heard both Brian and Patrick talk about how, it's really reduced that to next to nothing, and that it's really freed up the time their team can spend with their customers and different prospects, getting to know them better. And then, of course, we would not be here if we weren't talking about that. We think one of the key ways you can, weather this economy is to partner with a US-based estimating company so that you can, have them take that off your team's plate so they can focus on getting more bids in. Brian just mentioned that, his head of estimating is reviewing 10 different estimates each month. So he's freed up to focus on other things. So you're both enjoying that cost savings and getting more bids in. So hopefully that helps with that close rate. So that was a lot of information. Wanted to make sure we had time for any questions and answers. So this is the time for that. And I will say that we do also have a QR code here. So if you want to see what the experience is like before you decide to jump in, you can scan this QR code, and Pinnacle, will provide you kind of one free estimating project. So I'm going to leave that on the screen. Can, Jessica or Sharice, if there's any questions in the chat at all, or I don't think there are right now, but feel free to unmute yourself and ask.
There is one. Apart from accuracy, what other factors do clients typically expect estimators to consider to help ensure profitability in an unpredictable market?
Clients don't expect that from estimators. Okay, there is a difference. What Brian mentioned, that you have a function, and then you have an estimate, and then you have a decision that the ownership makes, so the sales executive made, as to how to put it together. The unpredictable market and how to strategize to get around it is unrelated to estimating. That's forecasting, that's reviewing, studying what's going on in the marketplace. What do I need to get ready for the next 6 months? What do I need to get ready for the next 3 months? Or whatever the cycle is for each individual company.
Other questions? I know we're getting close to the end of our time here. Brian and Patrick, just want to thank you both for taking time out of your obviously really busy days to share your thoughts and insights on, the role estimating, has played in your company's growth, the way your team is spending their time, potential expansion and all of those things. Any parting thoughts from either of you or from you, Faizi?
I'll let Brian go. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, we're going back to talking about change again. We all struggle finding employees, right? We know how difficult it is, and finding estimators is probably as difficult a chore as there is. And prior to Pinnacle and back in the experiences when we had our own in staff, we actually brought people from out of the country. I think it was H9s or H7s. I had to sponsor people, how to use an immigration attorney, and all the costs that were associated with that. we will go to crazy levels to try to fill our positions. And a lot of time, there's so much risk connected to those decisions. This one, actually, it's a pretty little risk category compared to the other things that I've done in my history is trying to grow my company. So
Is that because you know where to find me?
you know what it is? That I can always find you. That's
I
the
know,
that's
I
the
know,
wonderful thing. Yeah, that's the wonderful thing.
I know.
All right. I
Um,
think
I always,
we're, go ahead,
I
Patrick.
always say, if you give a company like Pinnacle a project, and sometimes just diving in and saying, let's see what you guys are all about. These guys obviously uh, stand behind what they do. If somebody has a estimator in-house, send the same project to Pinnacle and send it, to your estimator and see how they compare side by side. And I think um, you might be surprised that maybe somebody in-house misses something where Pinnacle picks up and vice versa. And we found that to be more accurate in the long term, between internal and external sources of estimating. Um, but I think just diving in and giving somebody a shot, is the best thing you can do, and see what the process looks like firsthand. And then you can make that decision for your company and if it's the right fit. But I think people will be pleasantly surprised the efficiencies and the way that things are handled and simplified when you have somebody that truly focuses and it's an expert in their field to provide you with these takeoffs.
Great.
It's
Um,
wonderful.
Brian, thank you. Thank you for your time, especially you taking time under the circumstances. I'm very appreciative. Patrick, thank you. I appreciate it. And to everybody who's listening out there, thank you for your time. This is all because of the team that supports me and that supports our U.S. operation. They have worked very hard. It's unbelievable what they have done, the suggestions they have come up with to improve what we do and what they continue to do every day. So hats off to them. I'm just a representative here in the face of all the people that are there.
Great. Well, with that, I know we're a couple of minutes over time, so thank you for those of you who stayed on with us. And I know this recording will be available on ASA's website within the next couple of days, right, Jessica?
Yes, that is correct.
Great. All right. Well, with that, please enjoy
Thank you
your.
again.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Patrick.